Good to have you with us this afternoon. Thank you for being here, and thank you for being at Bowl Expo. Any first-time attendees here? First-time Bowl Expo? Welcome, welcome, and welcome. Thank you. I think you're going to enjoy it. Hopefully this will be a habit. Come back every year, because there's a lot that you're not going to be able to get to simply with schedules, and there's a lot to learn, and there's a lot of people here who can help you out. So thank you for coming for the first time, and we hope you enjoy your week so far and that you'll enjoy the next couple of days as well. You know, we all know the bowling industry is going through an evolution right now. It's a sport, but increasingly it's a popular out-of-home entertainment option. And today's presentation is titled Modernizing for Extreme Success. Now, we're going to use 3 real-life case studies this afternoon, market analysis and consumer behavior research, and we'll explore the decisions that should be made to evolve your center into a revenue winner. Now, you can get ready this afternoon to see facility changes and what a new guest experience looks like and the marketing strategy that will find the right future customers for you. Our speaker today is Peter Starkel. He's been covered by the trade publications. He's been in numerous articles that explain how we need to redefine bowling for a new generation. Peter, along with his team at Fun Advisors and many brave bowling operators, have worked to reshape the operations and help centers better connect to these new customers. And as modernization specialist for nearly 20 years, he understands how to find the opportunities in a slowing market. So join me in welcoming Peter Starkel. Get ready to look at our industry a little bit differently than you have in the past. Peter Starkel, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. All right. First thing, we probably need to get my my projection. Do you know how to get the other thing? Somebody's coming in. Okay, well, good. It doesn't matter. Right now, we're going to have everybody stand up. Welcome to the first program after lunch. We're going to do a little calisthenics. We do this each and every post-lunch thing. Let's do a little bit of the windmill. Let's do some windmill. Anybody want to jog in place? We can do some jogging in place. And we can do the sobriety, which is, you know, close the eyes and touch the nose and get woken up a little bit here. All right, well, I'm here to talk a little bit about modernization. Thank you for waking up a little bit, and I'm going to try to make sure that you don't feel compelled to go back to sleep. I am a modernization specialist. I'm a branding consultant, and what basically I do is I help businesses go through the process of change. And above anything else that modernization is, it is a process of change for any business to go through. And so we're going to talk in those terms, and I'm going to get into some specifics about the industry here. So let's go through what today's agenda will be. First, we're going to do some case studies. We're going to show you a couple of different centers so you get an idea of what it is. We're going to do some discussion about what is in a modernization. In other words, what's a process. And there is a process to it. Folks who have gone through it, sometimes you get in the middle of it. It doesn't seem like a process, but there is one. And then finally, we're going to get started right now with talking a little bit about where America is and where it's going. Because we've changed as a country here. And I want to talk first about that. First and foremost, our customers have traditionally been sport customers, sport bowlers, right? They bowl in leagues, they come often, they have their couple of beers, and they're great. But the numbers have been in decline, and we know that story. It's been going on for a few years now. But who do we replace them with? Well, to understand that, we have to understand what is America these days. Because the reason why those sport bowlers are less and less often have a lot to do with what's going on in the country in general. So we're going to start out with this. I'm going to persuade you today to think about luxury clients. And that is a very important common phrase that we're going to start using more and more is luxury clients. Because these are the folks that have the financial wherewithal to make a difference to your center in the future. They have higher income, which is always good. They have higher education, but they have less play time, which means you're competing with other things that they could be doing with their time. Finally, they have higher expectations of what their experience is going to be. They are used to going to places like where we are right now, where the guest experience is really well done. There's always little tests, but people are very intuitive. They are concerned about your needs. And so as a result, you find that a luxury client is a little harder to keep happy. So let's talk about old America, new America. In the old America, 1978, we just took a snapshot. The adjusted income back then, the average household income median is $50,622. Today, in adjusted income, that number's gone down. So people have less average household income than they used to. And that's a big point to measure out, because when you compound it with this next reality, which is what are we spending our money in our household on, our obligations have gone up. In 1970s, when you looked at it, you had housing, you had health care, you had college, and then you had play money. And this big area here is in play money. About $32,000 in play money every year to go do things. That's why we had summer cottages, and we went golfing, and we'd go bowling, and we had all kinds of things. That same average American these days, well, they still have the housing expense, and they still have health care, and you notice they've grown. You've got child care now, which didn't really exist back then. We were a single income family, more than not, back in the 70s. So now we have two incomes, and the child care is a part of our expenses. And then we've got college that still exists. And then here's our play money. It's much less large than it used to be. As a matter of fact, it's less than half of what it used to be. So if I have a limited number of dollars to spend having fun with my family, it's going to change some of my behaviors and some of the things that I'm doing. So that's the first thing to think about. The second thing, and how is this happening? Here's what's happening to places, all places that are out-of-home entertainment. Now, this could be a movie theater, it could be a family entertainment center, it could be Disney World, it could be a bowling center, roller skating park, any place that really exists to have fun with families and with Americans these days. So, in the middle, where we're talking right now, there has not been much growth over the last 10 years. As a matter of fact, if you get further away from the middle, which we've heard this vast division between wealth and non-wealth in our country, you're starting to see that the dollars spent in out-of-home entertainment decline over and over again. And why is that? Well, two factors. One is the money isn't there like it used to be. The second is the in-home entertainment opportunities are much better. You can buy a 55-inch, flat screen television set. You can buy a ConnectX, which is better than most of the arcade games that you can purchase today for your FEC or for your bowling center. So your options as a consumer are getting better for your in-home, and the dollars available to spend going out are less and less. But the good news is we're seeing quite a bit of growth in the upper quintiles of our population. So we're seeing a 20% increase to the folks who are, say, between 40% of the income earners to about 10%. And that 10% of income earners on up, they're spending in out-of-home guest experiences even more than they ever have. So we track this. This is part of what I do for a living, is we see how are the dollars being distributed, where are the dollars coming from for people going out of their house looking for something fun to do. When we start looking at it, the other reality of it is the profile of the person changes a little bit. And so when we used to look at this is the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And everybody ever seen this before? It's kind of an idea, concept in psychology classes. The idea is that our psyches act different ways based on where our level of safety is. And so if we were starving and we had problems getting water, we would be at a psychological need basis or a physiological need, and that's crisis. And that doesn't happen in the United States. You probably would never see somebody with physiological needs in the United States. The next is safety needs, security and protection. There are certainly crime-ridden areas in the United States, and so people are seeking their safety needs. They want protection from potential life threats. The next is the social needs, a sense of belonging and love. And this is where our league bowlers, our sport bowlers that we've traditionally known, that's where they reside. They reside in the social need. So they want to get together with a bunch of guys, they want to belong, they want to have some fun, and that's pretty much how most bowling centers, that's the attitude. Everybody's got a big grin, everybody's having a great time. Here's the issue. This is your new potential customer. They're looking for esteem needs. And so we call them esteem seekers. So what do they want? Well, they want self-expression, they want recognition, they want status. I want people to know that I'm somebody. Right? And they are somebody that comes with a whole new layer of expectations, and they're all rooted in the fact that they are at that esteem level in the development, their psychological development. There's a last group which is called self-actualized. And self-actualized are folks that have climbed the mountain, they've already been successful, now they want to give away what they have. They want to give their knowledge away, they want to give their money away. In other words, they're there to help those around them because they've achieved everything they set out to achieve in life. And they're great folks, but we find that they're not big on coming to out-of-home guest experiences unless they're bringing their kids and their grandkids. In other words, these are the grandpas who are bringing their families with them and spending money with them. So this is one way, I guess, to look at where we're changing in America in terms of out-of-home entertainment, and a big important factor of how a bowling center has to really rethink the way that it operates when it moves from being in the sport industry to the family entertainment or the entertainment industry. There's a new group of people that's come up in the last 5 years, and I'm excited about it, and you guys should be too. It's the Millennials. So these are folks that are the baby boomers' kids. As a matter of fact, it used to be that 1950, people who are 58 years old, anyone in here 58? Okay, couple. So 58 was the biggest number. If you looked at all the ages in the United States, if you're 58 years old today, you had more people the same age as you than any other age in the country. 22 just bumped them off the #1 position. So now there are more 22-year-olds out there than there are 58-year-olds. What that means basically is we have another big bulge of population coming out, and I like them so far from my perspective. They've got great discretionary income. This is a generation that are able to get back out into the job market, and they're actually getting a job. They're not stalled in that limbo that we saw for about 5 or 7 years. They actually are making some good income. They're used to living below their means. They can live in an apartment, and they don't need a whole lot at home because they want to spend more and more money going out and having a good time. They don't really like families, and that's a challenge. If we're trying to be a bowling center that caters to families, this might be something that alienates another great potential market out there. And so they are always looking for the party, and they're great. They're a great population. So you take a look at them. There's an example of the Millennials out there, and they're enjoying a craft beer. There's a VIP suite behind them, and this scenario gets played out in facilities that are designed to cater to their needs. And that's the trick. It's designed to cater to their needs. So as we modernize, we have to start looking at ourselves. Who do we want to go after? Another thing is signature cocktails. The bar experience has to be exquisite for the Millennials. That's a little different than for the families. So let's talk about modernization. And here's an example of one kind of in the process. This is, if anybody watched on TV in the hotel here and they saw the guy talking about putting the BEC system in, and he talks about how great things are. This is actually that facility. It's Phil Huffman at BAM. And about a month before we were scheduled to modernize his center, the kitchen caught on fire. And so he basically got accelerated, but he had to shuffle to accommodate his leagues because league season wasn't done yet. And the whole place was essentially really turned on its head. But modernization will look like that at one point. You'll look around your center and it won't look like it looks today. And there is quite a bit of chaos in the process. So what is the process? Well, we start with evaluation. We just talked about how America's changing. And we talked about how we're not what we used to be. So we have to understand who lives in my neighborhood. We have to understand why do they need me. We have to do an evaluation. We have to do a snapshot of what's going on out there. Then we conceptualize it. Okay? So then we come up with an idea. What's an idea? And we've got some case studies. I'll show you some ideas. But we have to understand what we're going to be before we really start building. Once we get done with that, guess what? It costs money to do these. $800,000 to $2.5 million are generally the range of what you're looking at for funding one of these centers. And the banks want to know, do you know what you're doing? And are you going to be able to repay my loan? And so we'll talk about that a little bit. Design. You've got development, which is, of course, the construction process, and there's a lot of discussion as you start getting into this. That's probably the best part of this process out there where there's good education and there's good case study and things like that is the actual development process. Staffing up is the next part, and then your launch. And so when you start going through these steps, you have to really understand that it's more than just putting together a design, finding some money and building it. You have your operational considerations, and you have to understand, is what I'm building what my market is trying to build? I was in a center 3 years ago, and the gentleman had built almost an exact carbon copy of a center that was down in the Dallas, Texas area, and he wasn't getting the revenue that the guy down in Dallas, Texas was getting. And so we started going back and forth and looking, and he was in an economically depressed area. He didn't have an upscale market around him. He didn't have those ingredients that the center in Texas that was thriving had. And it was a very hard thing to do to try to go find a customer base for the center. He had put a lot of money into it, but he completely missed his market. So we don't want you to do that. That's a bad thing to have happen. So the who and the what are the most important. Who are they and what is it that they want? And these choices are very important. Of course, a restaurant and a bar is probably something that's going to change. I mean, the joke amongst the architects who are in this industry modernizing is, well, yeah, we're designing a restaurant with a bowling alley in the back now. And if you are in a snack bar situation, if you have a small bar operation, you're going to understand that your food and your alcohol offerings are going to be a much greater part of your business. And you're going to have to probably have a chef that understands how to build a menu and how to create a really comprehensive menu, probably more than what you have in a snack bar situation. So a restaurant and a bar are probably going to happen in most every modernization situation. A candy bar is one for families and the kids, meeting rooms, VIP suite, bowling, arcade, redemption, laser tag, small box attractions. All of these things are different ingredients options that you may have when you look to go put together a modernized center. And if you look, most cases, bowling is something that you have today. You have a snack bar, not a restaurant, and you probably have a bar right now if you're a traditional league bowling center. A lot of the rest of this stuff are things that you may not be understanding where the money is for them. So let's go from there. When it comes to funding, working with the banks, this is what they want to know. Well, they want to know what the concept is. So, of course, you're going to have a blueprint, and this is actually a center that we've been working on here for a while. So you want a concept. What is the concept? They want to know who your market is. Do the people that are in our community, are they going to be attracted to what you're building? Is there a relationship there? The development costs, which is, of course, your construction costs, and whatever number you give them, don't worry, it'll be more. Almost inevitably 15% more than what you estimate. If you pad it, then you may come in pretty close, but development costs are rarely delivered at what you think they're going to be. They want a pro forma, and a pro forma is basically, that is a set of operational. So right now you have a profit and loss in your business. They want to see what's the profit and loss look like after it's been built, and is there going to be money left over to pay us back? So your new expenses and your new income are going to be put into a new profit and loss, which is a projection based on comparable centers around the country, based on what you know you feel the restaurant and the bar and the bowling and all of those profit centers are going to do. So the pro forma is the next thing, and they want to see the bottom line is, are you going to make enough money so you can pay me back? And what happens if you don't exactly hit those numbers? So they want to see a stress test. They want to see what happens if income's lower than you think and expenses are higher. Can you still pay me back? So the pro forma is another big part of the funding. Then you've got the collateral, which in many cases is the building itself, but they want to know what you're going to be putting into the game, and you do have to have some cash. So typically when you're looking at funding, these are some of the key ingredients the bank's going to want to see. So just to kind of keep that in mind. The next thing is we get into development. It'll take longer than you think. Don't start until you're done planning. I had a guy who started pulling up bowling lanes before the plan had come together, and the bowling lanes got put back in because he was getting a little ahead of himself. But really conceptually put the whole plan together before you really start the development process. And it may seem like common sense, but you'd be amazed. And then the other thing is ADA and other issues. When you start getting into some of these attractions, there are ways to develop your plans that are compliant with ADA, so you don't need an elevator and you don't need certain things like ramps and things like that. So really work with somebody as a designer who understands this industry and understands when the zoning or the building department says, well, you need a ramp for that or you need sprinklers here, how to communicate with them. The reality is that you're probably building the first of its kind in your county or in your city, so your building department probably is going to need a bit of education and need some examples that they can go look at of how these centers have been built without some of the more extreme ADA compliant things. And it is still an ADA compliant facility, but you have to word things the right way in order to fall within the proper ordinances and zoning. So let's talk next a little bit about the organization. And organizational strategy, when you start really looking at that, this is another big side of it that's going to change. So this up here is a traditional bowling center, and you've got an owner up there, and you've got a general manager, and you've got a league operator, you've got probably a waitress, and you've got a few key staff. When you start going into a bowling entertainment center, look at how many more roles there are in the center. Your staff may not increase dramatically, but the number of jobs that need to get done in the building, I call those roles, your roles will increase significantly. You do need people who are really trained in being restaurant. You do need probably a food and beverage manager now. You do probably need somebody who's going to continue to run the bowling operations but can also oversee arcade. You need somebody who's going to be a scheduler. You need a trainer for sure, somebody that as new staff comes on, they shadow them for a while, or they pair them up with somebody who knows the job and helps them get to understand kind of the culture of your center. You do need maintenance, and maintenance increases a little bit, but you can see the organization changes quite a bit when you start getting through this. And so you have to think about it. It's not just building the building, it's changing the dynamic and the culture of my center. And that's probably, of the things that I've seen go on, you have a general contractor who's going to help you build it. You're in charge of making sure this works. And so be really conscientious as to what is the additional roles and how do I manage them, and it gets to be part of that equation. And then we've got launch. So now we've built the center, we've staffed it up. By the way, I would highly recommend that you go looking for a general manager or a manager and get them in at least 90 days before you start building this center, you know, when the center's ready to go. You want to staff at least 2 weeks to a month before your soft opening, because your staff needs to understand what's going on. You will be, if you roll this out the right way, swamped the minute the grand opening happens, and you're going to be overwhelmed for 6 weeks to 2 months, and you'll just be underwater constantly chasing. You need a staff who knows what the plan is and they know how to do it. So getting prepared is an important part of this. So we go through the grand opening, and occupancy permit is like the green light. Your staff's already trained and ready to go. Your menu is ready to go. Your packages are developed. You can sell in packages. It's not just come in and are you going to buy everything a la carte? If I bundle some food and a couple games of laser tag and some bowling and $5 in arcade play, I'm going to get that average ticket up. So building packaging into this is an important part of it. Your point of sale is programmed, and this is actually a conversation I was just having yesterday. Right now you may be using just a bowling software. If you add video games, you're going to have a card system like Embed or Intercard that you're going to have work together. If you have a more comprehensive food operation, you may have to get a standard point of sale like a Micros or a microsale. So you've got all these technologies that need to come together. Then you've got your equipment working. Video games show up. About a third of the time, there's a problem that's going to take 2 days to figure out. So you make sure that all the equipment's working. You have a grand opening strategy, contesting, press plan in place. This is an exciting thing in most communities, opening one of these centers. It's not just like another drugstore opening. Most people have not seen one. You can get lots of free press coverage out of it. You can get lots of information in blogs or articles and things like that. You can invite middle school kids to come in and try out the laser tag in a kind of a soft launch situation, so they start telling all their friends, oh, you got to go see this place. But word of mouth is the big driver, and having contests and a press plan is a big part of the marketing rollout. You need an email and address capture system. These days, we don't go buy radio and TV and newspaper to market. It's too expensive and it's just not effective, especially for this industry. We have to have a direct relationship, and we all know about Facebook and we all know about that, but make sure that as people are coming in, we're giving them an incentive to capture their email addresses, because that becomes our relationship with that person. We can put offers out, it doesn't cost very much at all, and you have people showing up just merely for the offers. And then finally we have what we call the reason to return. So somebody comes in the first time, I want them to come 3 or 4 times. Why is that? I want them to start forming a habit. And this is a big part of this, is I want them to develop a habit to coming back to my center. So launch is a very important point in time. Like I said, it's about 6 weeks to 2 months that you go through it. And you get through this process, and it's a very, it's a very tumultuous process. So again, the more you plan, the better your life is. And then the last component of this in running one of these centers is sustaining. So your revenue is different than it is in a sport house. You've got groups that you can be selling to. You've got events that you can be putting in that will generate sales. Of course, if you have a league center today, you have that league revenue that's still there. You have contests you can do. You've got team development that is an ongoing thing. And of course, you have a training staff. You do surveys to find out how things are going. And you do an update. So you have new attractions that you can consider after 3 or 4 years. That's the general number. and you do an updated menu. Your menu doesn't stay the same forever. So that kind of gets through some of the aspects of what we're talking about when we get into what I call an experience destination. And am I going too fast here? Do you want to take a break here and kind of go through this? Okay. Here's really what customers are looking for. And this is the important part of this. Customers are looking for an experience. And I want to show you kind of a good program out there. It's called Fish. It's actually quite old, but it's still one of the best simple systems out there. Their whole thing is, in creating a relationship with your staff, is be there, play, make their day, choose your attitude. And it's really a part of a culture that you would want to create in your center. So be there is the first step. And of course, we know what be there means. It means I'm present, I'm here, I've got my head in the job, I'm not looking and texting my friends, I'm not doing things that don't involve me taking care of my customers. Play, it has to be, you're in the entertainment business now, it has to be a sense of play that we do. Make their day is another big part of it. When we look at a guest experience, when somebody comes out to an entertainment center, and this is a restaurant, this is a movie theater, we have a first impression, how am I greeted the first time I walk through that door? We have a peak moment, and we have a last impression. Okay? In a sport bowling center, it's you come in, the first impression may be seeing your buddies. You haven't seen them all week, right? But you probably go past the counter and go drop your bag, and that's your first impression. Peak moment, maybe your team just won, or maybe you did something pretty extraordinary in your bowling, and so that was the peak moment of the day. And the last impression, of course, is leaving and it going well. Peak moment in an entertainment center is a little different. It's being greeted at the counter. It's safe to say 50 to 70% of the people walking in have never been in a center like this. So there's a little bit of a quick tour. That you ever been to our center before? Let me give you a quick tour. Over here is bowling. We've got a restaurant over there. We've got laser tag and our arcade center over there. What are you looking to do today? So you start the relationship off not just assuming they want to go bowl, but they're here to have fun, and they need you to explain that to them. Peak moment can be good or it can be bad. So something extra special that a kid who's having problems with video game, one of the staff comes over and helps them out and shows them how to do it, gets them feeling good about having a good experience. That's a peak moment. Peak moment is the waitress doing something that makes everybody laugh at the table. We're looking for that emotional connection. And that thing that will cause us to remind. How many people have walked away from a bad meal and the peak moment was something that was completely rotten, and you tell your friends about how bad it was? That's a peak moment. It's not a good one, it's a bad one. We want peak moments to be positive in entertainment centers. And so understanding how to train your staff how to make their day is a big part of creating that success. Choose your attitude is another part of it too, and that comes down to, I have been in enough bowling centers to know that there is a waitress who is used to working with the leagues, who would probably hate dealing with families. It's probably, everybody laughs, but we all have that kind of, she gets along, she's a little salty, she has a great time with the league guys, but you can tell she's just not a kid person. That's probably not somebody you're going to want to be in there during the family times of an entertainment center. It doesn't mean they have to leave the organization, it means they have to be there during league times and not there during the times where families are there. And so that's sometimes called choose your attitude. So let's show you how the cycle of experience works for a luxury client. And this is kind of the inner workings of how decisions get made, how people make a decision to come and spend money with you. So this is a real life scenario. Anna is a friend of mine, and she sends a text out to 22 people. We're going to be going to the Outre Lounge, Inside Out Gallery tonight, 7:30. Join us if you can. So we're invited. Okay? A friend of ours invites us. Next thing happens, we have a great moment. It was actually a surprise party for a friend. Here's a whole group of us. The tab was over $400. And we had a great experience. And there we are sharing it on Facebook. Big smiles, big tabs, that's the goal. And then we get into word of mouth. And this is Yelp. Urban Spoon is now finally coming online in most smaller markets. TripAdvisor. But you want a good review. And then what happens? Well, one of those 22 people will invite their friends next week. So this is a cycle that goes on all the time. This is how people develop social atmosphere. We're not going out as a nuclear family of 4 like we used to. We're going out as a group. So I may go with 3 or 4 of my friends. We're a total of 16 people when you count our kids. Can you accommodate groups, and can you take care of it? Because that's how the shopping and the whole experience is going these days. So when we get into this, let's take a look at 3 case studies. And I kind of went through that fairly quickly, and I think sometimes it's easier when we look at it when we see real-life examples. And so I'm going to look at 3 different examples today. One is BAM, which is a center that just opened here last fall. It's a medium-sized center. I think they were 32 lanes before. They did a little bit of construction to expand. They took some lanes out. So that's a pretty typical bowling center, is BAM scenario. You got Sparians, which is a center that it was in Raleigh, North Carolina. They just sold out to Kings, which is another family entertainment bowling center. They sold their center just a couple of months ago. But it's a classic example of an adult center geared towards those active adults. And the third is Airway, which I call a super center. I mean, the thing is a monster, and it's got all kinds of things going on with it. And it's a very complex setting. But if you've got a center that has 40, 50, 60 lanes, one of these big old airport bowling centers, a super center model is one that you have the potential to do. So let's start with BAM, and this is their floor plan. And I'll get into it pretty... When we start looking at it, basically over in this area is a new construction. They built actually an expansion to the building, and they built it tall enough to put in a 2-story laser tag. If you're looking at getting into laser tag as an attraction, 1 stories just really do not generate the revenue that you'd want to see. 2 stories really is where you want to go. And so you have a mezzanine. You may have 7 feet underneath the mezzanine, and you'll have 7 or 8 feet above it. And so he developed this from scratch. He has what was the original concourse, but he's put a wall in, and this is now a VIP center back here. So you can see over here is the VIP center. And that's great for groups and things like that. The center is still there. They still do league bowling. They actually have some of the league players occasionally have to come over to the VIP center to bowl when they go bowling as well. They also have a restaurant operation, which sits back here, and then they also have what used to be the bowling lounge. They've set up some booze and things like that. So when you take a look at it, it services a multitude of different operations. They can do groups. They can do their league, traditional league players. They can do families in this area here. They've got the bar and libations, so they've got active young adults. They've got something for that. But they don't all show up at the same time. So leagues come when? Well, they be coming from Tuesday through Thursday night. By the way, Friday and Saturday, it's always that touch and go. Do we get rid of our leagues on Friday and Saturday night as we go through this modernization process? Some centers say, yeah, I'd get rid of it in a minute. I can make so much more money if the families are there. Other centers say, Fridays are going to still be pretty quiet. I'll leave my leagues in place on Friday night. So your league population is there, pretty much driving revenue during the week, 32 weeks out of the year. Corporate groups are great pretty much during the holiday time, so anytime, maybe sometimes even before Thanksgiving, but from Thanksgiving to Christmas, you should be just doing nothing but parties and groups and those types of activities. They will buy out the whole center if they're large enough, and that's a nice chunk of change that I'll talk about here in a minute. But so the VIP section is great for groups. It's also great for people who are socializing, having what I call gatherings, which are smaller parties. So birthday party, and I'm going to have 20 friends. I'll rent that space. It's a private space, and I'll have that to myself. So that's a nice separate revenue, and that can happen anytime during the week. Some groups come during the daytime. Some groups will come during league play, and you have to figure out how to make everybody fit. The active adults that we talked about are using this type of space typically after 8:30 or 9 o'clock at night. So the nice thing is you can do leagues during the week, but if you have a good, robust schedule built for active adults, then they start rolling in as the leagues are rolling out, and they don't really end up using the facility at the same time. And then the last group, which is the families, and there's a lot of revenue in the families, and that comes during usually Friday afternoon through Sunday afternoon. And again, they will do birthdays during the week. It's not as prevalent. It's not a majority of your customers are coming during the week to go into the arcade, but that happens during the weekends. Saturday, typically this place, if things are going well, is so busy it would make your head spin if you walked into it. There's people running all over the place. You've got 4 or 5 different birthday parties going on at every given minute, and it's a lot of chaos, but it's a lot of fun. And they still do use the lanes. It's not like the lanes are sitting empty. You will have people using the lanes, but it becomes an attraction, like laser tag, to that group of people. to league bowlers, it's a sport. That's what they're coming for, is the bowling center. So they look at the bowling lanes a little bit differently. So when we start getting into it, the arcade in a center about this size, and his arcade is about 5,000 square feet, maybe 4,500. His revenue potential is about $1.2 million. If he's fully utilizing his redemption center, if he's fully utilizing the laser tag can pull in $250,000 if it's really run well. I've seen some centers reach $300,000 with a 2-level center. You need 20 to 30 vests. They need to be busy all the time. So when you look at this, an arcade has a potential. The nice thing about it is, if you look at these margins, the average video game or the arcade game that you have, its payoff is between 12 and 18 months. So you don't have, your profit margin is huge here. If anything, if I had the perfect world, I'd have an arcade, I'd have probably the bowling, and I'd have a bar, and get rid of everything else, because those are the 3 greatest areas in which you can make profit in a center. You need to have everything else too, but so there's great potential there. Then you've got your bar, and again, a bar includes some food, it includes revenue from your leagues and things like that. Potential in a center that's about 32 lanes to begin with is probably about $800,000 when you really get going. Craft beer is going to probably be part of the mix. You're going to have probably some good cocktail and harder alcohol options in there, and you're going to have a nice pub menu. The last thing is what we call VIP and groups, and in a center like this, a good potential target is $500,000, and this is above your league revenue and the money that you're making today. This is a whole new profit center, and you're selling to groups and things like that. Now, I talked to you about this concept of a buyout, where somebody comes along and says, okay, we've got 250 people, we want to just buy the whole place for 4 hours. You can typically find in those scenarios to pricing yourself anywhere between, $5,000 an hour up to, I've seen $12,000 an hour. So you can end up with a $30,000, $40,000 tab. Guy owns the place. Give him the keys to the place for 4 hours or so. That happens typically around Christmas time, but you also have the summer picnics and things along those lines. So that's an example of I guess what I would say a typical center. Let's go and look at Sparians. So Sparians is really for adults and for groups, and I'll show you the layout because it's a pretty unusual layout. So this is about 12 lanes of bowling, and it's just a regular 12-lane concourse. This is seating, and this is all bar and restaurant seating right here. Then back here they have another 4 lanes here, 6 lanes here, and this whole section can be turned into a conference center. Buyout here, by the way, minimum is 4 hours, $50,000, and he would do it quite frequently. So groups is really their primary market. They make money on groups. You start looking at the different things. You've got active young adults who come in here, and they've got trivia night, and they've got all kinds of other really young adult-oriented things that go on. We had online reservation systems, and the lanes would be 80% sold out by Thursday for the weekend. So if you didn't reserve your lane ahead, the chances are you're going to show up and not be able to get on the lane. So this is really just for adults. Now, if I have kids, can I bring them? Of course. But is there much for them to do? Well, there's a couple of arcade games that never really did that well for kids because they were things like Beercade and Skeet Ball. I mean, they were adult entertainment options, but the kids could play them. Bowling, of course, kids have a lot of fun with bowling, but this really isn't built for families, and it's really not their target market. So let's take a look at this. Very high appeal. When you look at it, groups range from corporate to those gatherings we talked about, those groups of 16 to 20 people that are getting together after work. Celebrations, bachelorette parties, you've got retirement parties, anything like that where you're celebrating a specific occasion. Rehearsal dinners often will take place in a center like this. You've got the buyouts, which I've already kind of explained that. But you also have an inbound and outbound sales effort, and this is the one thing I wanted to touch on. They had 2 people who were on the street every day creating those relationships to keep the place busy, and they had 1 person who was inside every day, would take the smaller group call-in reservations and would handle all the details for the 2 outbound salespeople, putting contracts together and things like that. So they had a very dedicated sales effort to make this happen. On the adult side of things, They did themed nights, like I said, trivia. They had a variety of other different theme nights that went on to keep guests from coming back night after night. The biggest component about this was how they programmed the bar. They had a lot of craft beer, and they did specialize in martinis and things like that. So they created an environment where they really had what that group is looking for. Their appetizers were really strong too. Does anybody have a Buffalo Wild Wings in your market? That is the Millennium category killer right now. Those places are packed all the time. They're a sports bar. They have typically 50 plus TV screens. And when you sit and watch what goes on, they're tables of 4 to 6 people. Everybody's looking at a different television set. Then they're looking at their phone. Then they're looking over here. Then they're drinking a beer. The waitstaff is just constantly, like sharks, pooling around these people, constantly refilling their drink orders and things like that. If you can create that type of dynamic, that type of atmosphere, you create an environment where pretty much your revenue is going to be very strong with this population. Online reservations is a big key with this group. So revenues come from 40% through group sales. Bar and food is going to be about 40%, attractions 20%. So somebody just coming in and going bowling, that revenue is not a substantial part of their overall scheme of revenue. They're really a corporate center, but bowling is a feature attraction there. The potential for a center like this, and again, this is not a pie in the sky, is about 5.5 million. Of the 3 scenarios I'm going to show you, they have the potential of generating the most revenue per square foot of any of the 3. Just because group revenue is so much better, the opportunity to tap corporate dollars and the margins that you get out of a corporate event as opposed to individual tickets is so much greater that this has a great potential per square foot. So let's look at our super center. And this is Airway. And I'm a little nervous because the general manager of Airway is sitting in the back right now. But Airway has pretty much everything you could believe. It's an unbelievable center. First off, 40 lanes of bowling. They have a full tap room. They have a full arcade, and the arcade, I'll get into all the attractions that they have, but it services every market, and you can have a bunch of active adults on one end of the building and a bunch of kids on the other end of the building. They never have to see each other. They've got their own entrance, and it coexists. You try to make active young adults walk past the arcade to go to the bar, they won't do it. If they have their own entrance and it's their own experience and it just seems almost like a different business at the other end of the center, then you create that. Airway is actually based in Kalamazoo, Michigan. So it was originally a 56-lane center, and I think they started from scratch and just built it out. The tap room is actually brand new. It was an attraction or a profit center that was just added last year, and it's going phenomenally well. So as far as profit centers go, of course, they have sport bowling. They have an arcade with Redemption Center. They've got laser tag, bumper cars, go-karts, mini golf, Palladium, and Atomic Rush as attractions. So go-karts, of course, a whole other thing. And now they're talking ropes course and other things as well. So it's definitely a good family fun place. 24 taps in the tap room, almost all Michigan beer. Oddly enough, one of the groups that reserves this room most often are breweries. They come into Kalamazoo, which is a big craft beer mecca. They rent the whole place out. And they do these tap outs. And so they'll bring all their beers on, and they like the idea of putting 24 of their beers on a bar. And so it opens up to that whole craft market. It has a 6+ lane VIP bowling suite that's attached to the tap room, and it's got 3 conference rooms. So you start taking a look at this, and you start looking at how many people does it take to run a center like that. It's an overwhelming thing, but that's a 56-lane bowling center. That's what it started with, and they keep adding a little bit more every year, and it's a dynamic center. So when you start taking a look at it, their markets are just about every market that exists for an entertainment center. You have families, you have leagues, active adults, corporate groups, gatherings, which are those small casual groups of 20, 25 people or 16 to 20 people. Just about anybody you could think of is a candidate for this center. And they're big enough to handle it all. But here's the challenge. You start looking at the profit. Well, bowling, I think, is 20 to 30%. And Mark, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but as a percentage of total sales, it's not a substantial part of it, is it? Third, and third. Okay, so about bowling is about a third. The arcade is about a third. And groups factor in there. They look at it differently, where the group revenue gets spread out. But group revenue has the potential of being about 15%. You have income, another 5% of income coming from other areas. But you can see now a center like this has a potential revenue of $7 to $8 million. It's a big footprint. And so there's a great revenue potential because you're getting money from every direction and you can get it more frequently. So again, when you start looking at the three different scenarios, you've got one that's got a potential of doing about $3 or $4 million in a typical conversion setting. You've got an adult-focused one in an adult market that is potential of doing $5.5 million. And its footprint's not that much larger than that 32-lane center. Actually, I think it's a little bit smaller. And then you've got this, which is, again, was started a 56-lane center, and then they've got outdoor attractions and things like that. The revenue potential just goes crazy. So you start looking at, how do I run an operation like this? And this is that, back to what I said at the very beginning of this conversation, operations is something you really need to be paying attention to. Well, of course, you have a general manager, and then you have a strong food and beverage operation. You've got a sales and marketing effort. You've got an arcade operation. You've got bowling, which, of course, we all pretty are comfortable with. Then you've got party and banquet. You've got a maintenance staff that has to be responsible for a variety of different things to fix. And then you've got accounting and management. It's a much larger company at that point when you start looking at it, if you're looking to start today from a traditional bowling center. So when we get down to thinking about this, the big question is, what do you want to be? And I often will start these conversations with people is, are you ready to change? I mean, is this what you would want to be? Your job changes a little bit. If you're in a position where you've been in the bowling industry for a while, you're probably going to hire a general manager to make this happen. I would not recommend most people who were comfortable and accustomed to the league house type environment running this thing on their own. They will just not be very happy with it. Better off going and finding somebody who's got some food and beverage background and complement the staff that really is strong in bowling right now. The arcade and the game room and things like that can be supplemented too. So it becomes a situation where you're drawing people from a variety of different skill sets. Is that what you want to be? And if your heart's not into it, I've seen some really nice centers that aren't ever going to realize their potential because the owner's heart's not into it. And so they really aren't doing what they need to do to wake up in the morning and say, okay, who do we go after and make more money with from here and there? And these three examples I've shown you, all of them have that profile. They all were looking to create the next opportunity and do something that would better what they are today. So understanding who do I want to be is the first thing that you really should ask yourself beyond any of the other questions that you'll go through in the modernization process. Do your homework. Market research, and I hope that when you start seeing all those different ways that you can make money, those ways that they're making money are all based on what? Who's out there in their particular marketplace that they can make money. So doing market research is a big, big part of it. Finding that staff, the right team, is also very important. I've seen really great places that are run, not so great, and it's like a Ferrari being driven by a 16-year-old that doesn't understand how a stick shift works. You've got to have the team in there who are going to make it running like a fine machine. You have to have development. In other words, you have to be developing systems and making sure that things are happening consistently. So this is a big part of doing this. But the bottom line is, if you love what you're doing and you love making people happy, which I've worked with and talked to a lot of bowling owners, that's what they really like doing, is they love having the place crowded and they love the noise and they love seeing people that they recognize. If you love that, then this is going to be taking that passion to the next level. Because it is, at the end of the day, it's a fun business to be in. It beats selling tires, or it beats doing other things that you could be doing with your money. So do what you love and love what you do, and if this is it, then this is the next progression to it. So thank you very much. My name is Peter Starkel, and I'm at funadvisors.com, and we can go into some questions and answer and those types of things, because we do have a panel that's coming up right after this, but we can get into some conversation. And how much time do we have left on our little gentleman? Look at my clock here. So yeah, we've got some time here to do some question and answer. So go ahead. So Sparians is Raleigh, Durham. Raleigh, Durham, it's... What's that? Population, yeah, about that million, a little over 1 million. The thing about Raleigh that's got going for it is it has 3 colleges. It's a big college town. There are 2 different types of college towns. There's what's called the Tier 1 college towns and the Tier 2. Tier 1 generally see second, third generation college students who typically come with mom and dad's money with them. The second tier colleges are typically first generation college students, and they're not a great market to try to go after generally because they don't come with mom and dad's wallet. They come with a loan and probably a job. And so they don't have as much time or discretionary income. But they have that. They also have an emerging tech going on. The Triangle, it's called, is the technical center, and they're right in the heart of that. So they had one buyout that was, I think, $60,000. It was the CEO's 28th birthday party, and the executive staff actually paid to have one of the windows removed and have his Ferrari put in the lobby as a joke. And it was a $60,000 4-5-hour event. They're out there in many markets, not maybe at that price point, but $20,000, $30,000 buyouts are in most markets out there. So, any other questions that we've got right now? All right, did I overwhelm you? I see some sheep. Well, and to add to that, that's a really good point on small market. BAM, which is the second, let me go back here a little bit. The first case study that we looked at, I want to make you guys dizzy by flying through these, but the second first case study that we showed you, this one right here, this is actually in a town of about 112,000. So it's a fairly small market. It's kind of shadowed by a larger market that's about almost 1 million. So it's sort of like an offshoot. And he has another bowling center in his market. We really looked hard as to exactly what we're going to do to make sure that this got done right, because there is opportunity to build a center and get over ambitious with the budget. In a marketplace like you were saying, about 50,000 people, I wouldn't look at probably investing more than $1 million to $1.5 million into the facility with the anticipation of getting my return for that investment. So you scale down. You don't put as much into a development in a smaller market. So, other questions on this? Yeah. Yeah, I've got 6 going on right now. We've got a center in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. We're putting in a 48 tap craft bar. We're modernizing the arcade center and things like that, and we're adjusting that. We've got 2 centers in the Detroit area. I've got a center in Des Moines that I'm working with. I mean, they're going on right now. As a matter of fact, we're just at the cusp of this exploding, the modernization. There are only right now, 5,000, 5,500 bowling centers. I would say about 10% of them, 10 to 15% are true candidates for modernization, just based on their location or the size of the actual footprint of the center. So we know that this is something. The big reason behind it is the banks are starting to get an appetite to lending money again, and that's probably the biggest thing that's kind of created some pent-up demand, is that the banks just have not been comfortable, or their terms are just pretty high to lend money, and that's starting to finally open up. So opportunities that have been maybe in the hopper for a few years, ideas that people have had, those centers are starting to move forward now. So it is a good climate, banking-wise, to consider doing this nowadays. Well, sometimes I'll tell people 250 to 300,000 in laser tag, and they look at you like, what are you talking about? And it's very realistic. By the way, I would encourage you, the trade show starts tomorrow. Actually, Latham down there has actually built a real laser tag arena. You can actually go play laser tag on the floor tomorrow. So if you're not accustomed to it, most people who have gone down the path have probably gone through it, but there's a great way to do that tomorrow. There's a laser tag actually that's open down there. Yeah. So when you start looking at laser tag, one of the things that, again, I strongly recommend is if you can't have more than about 4,000 square feet of playable space. Now, that can be a 3,000 square foot footprint with 1,500 in a mezzanine. By the way, we don't call them second levels, they're mezzanines, because the ADA laws like mezzanines, they don't like second stories. And so you can have a mezzanine, but you have to have ramps, and that's the big thing, is the ramp, the grade of the ramp can only be so steep. So your footprint has to be able to accommodate that. We've seen some tricks, bowling centers that'll have, say, 14, 16 feet. of ceiling space, just because their concourse is domed. We've actually dug out underneath to kind of sneak out, so it's not actually the height that you could really do a mezzanine, but you kind of create an underpass, if you will, underneath the platform, and that is kind of an inexpensive way to trick around it. But I wouldn't probably look at going under probably 4,000 feet if you're, total playable space. 20 jackets, that's about a 20 vest setting. 20 to 30 vests is what you're shooting for. And you can start doing the math. It's $6 a kid. The turnover is every 10 to 12 minutes. In that scenario, in a 20 vest situation, you're doing 6 times 20. It's $120 every 10 minutes. During the weekend, you can really make some money on a laser tag arena. So, other questions about kind of things that we went through? And again, I went through it fairly quickly because I wanted to make sure that there's a lot to it. This is an 18-month process from start to finish, typically, to go through this. If everything is clicking, it can take longer if financing gets stalled or you have an uncooperative building department. So, all right, if not, then I would urge you, there's going to be, the next session, there's actually going to be a roundtable discussion of people who are in the middle of doing this and have completed this. I know Mark from Airway will be there talking about it. I would encourage you to do that. That would be a great follow-up to what we just got done talking about, because these are guys who actually are in the process or have gone through this as well. So with that, I thank you very much for your time today, and if you have any questions beyond that, I've got a card up here for you, and we can talk about them. I'll also be, let's see, booth 1113. I'll be right next to Intercard on the floor if you want to come and talk to me too. Thank you.